Millionaire reveals incredible truth about son dead for 4 years with 2 homeless men, a tragic discovery that changes everything. David Carter stood before the mirror, an image of success in his crisp, tailored suit. Yet inside, despair gnawed at him like a persistent shadow. The thought of Jake, his son, flooded back like a violent storm. 4 years had passed since that terrible night, yet the silence in his home felt deafening. In the world of wealth and influence, where David had carved a niche as a self-made millionaire, this was the price he paid for success, a haunted soul, isolated by his grief. Thoughts raced through his mind as he fumbled with the tie around his neck. Did money offer protection, or had it blinded him to the dangers lurking in his son's life? David inhaled, aware of the heavy weight that pressed against his chest. He had buried himself in work since Jake's passing, avoiding the reflections that led back to that night, the despair, the regret. Had he failed as a father? The question echoed in his mind, leaving no room for comfort. He was expected to be strong, a leader. But success felt hollow in the absence of his child's laughter. Perhaps it was true what they said. The American dream can sometimes come at an agonizing price. Pushing back the painful thoughts, he rummaged through Jake's old belongings the previous night, each item a relic of happier times. That's when he stumbled upon the crumpled photograph, Jake beside 2 homeless men, Keith and Marcus, their arms thrown around each other as they laughed. A sudden jolt of emotional disarray hit David. Who were these men? How had he not known that his son had forged such deep connections outside the protective bubble of his suburban life? The evidence was undeniable. Jake had faced struggles he had kept hidden, surrounded by 2 souls society had cast aside. Turning back to the mirror, David felt the weight of moral obligation. If he wanted closure, he had to find Keith and Marcus. The thought sent him into a whirlwind of unease. Could he interact with that world, where his wealth shed no light? Sweeping emotions crashed into one another, curiosity battling guilt, determination warring with reluctance. Would visiting them in the gritty parts of town make him confront the very things he had avoided? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days melted into each other as David took to the streets, edging closer to understanding the remnant of Jake's life he had isolated himself from. The disdainful looks from the affluent world only deepened his anguish. He heard their stories, Keith's resilience, Marcus's unwavering loyalty. Each enlightening moment pressed harder against David's conscience, challenging everything he believed about worth and success. The luxurious trappings of his life felt incongruous against the backdrop of truth he was confronting. Jake hadn't wanted that lifestyle. He had craved authenticity, connection. Now standing at the precipice of realization, David faced the soul-crushing pressure of his choices. Was he willing to step into the shadows that had been populated by his son? As he prepared to meet Keith and Marcus, he grappled with anxious uncertainty. Would he discover the ugly truth he worked to shield himself from? Or would it ignite a flicker of hope, a path forward through his despair? With every step towards their meeting place, heart racing and palms sweating, he sensed the weight of his past and the disarray of his present converge. The unease swelled within him, intensifying his fear of what lay ahead. Could he bridge the chasm between his opulent life and the reality young Jake had faced? The question loomed larger than David himself, a darkness gathering around him as he took another step into the unknown, his fate waiting just on the other side. David arrived at a weathered park bench, the air thick with the scent of aging concrete and faint traces of lingering uncertainty. The city unfolded around him, a cacophony of laughter and strife, a stark contrast to the silence that had enveloped his life for so long. He spotted Keith and Marcus sitting a few feet away, their bodies relaxed yet somehow alert, like each moment held more gravity than the last. The sight of them sent a tremor through David. They were raw, real, and devoid of the facades he had grown accustomed to in his world of opulence. No tailored suits, no polished facades, only the authenticity that his son had sought. As he approached, the duality of their existence hit him harder than he expected. This was a world he had deliberately overlooked, yet it was the very fabric of Jake's life. "Excuse me," David found himself saying, his voice attempting to steady the swirl of vulnerability and intensity. "Are you Keith and Marcus?" They turned together, their expressions unreadable. "Yeah, that's us," Keith replied, his eyes scanning David's tailored outfit, baffled by the contrast. "I'm David," he said, hesitating as awkwardness seeped in. "Jake's father." The acknowledgement hung in the air, heavy and poignant. Keith's face softened, sadness mingling with a flicker of recognition. "We heard about what happened. Didn't know if you'd ever come around." David's heart sank as he sensed both their questions and their pity. "I didn't know him as well as I thought I did," he admitted, his vulnerability surfacing in waves. "I saw this photo of you guys together, and I realized I don't understand what was going on in his life. I'm here to know him better, to understand." Marcus exchanged a glance with Keith. "Jake was looking for something, you know, something real. Not everything was what it seemed." David's intensity surged. "What do you mean? What didn't I see?" Each word felt like a hook, pulling him deeper into revelations that terrified him. "He struggled with feeling invisible," Keith said, a hint of anger lacing his voice. "You buried yourself in work, and he felt like he was buried too. We opened up a world he couldn't share with you, the hardships, the fear, but also the hope." David's mind raced. A chilling clarity washed over him. Had his success, the very thing he thought might protect Jake, suffocated the bond they shared? He opened his mouth to respond, but was robbed of words, the truth crashing over him like a wave. "How can I make this right?" he finally asked, desperation tinging his voice. "How do I honor his memory?" Marcus turned serious, leaning forward. "Be here. Speak up for the fights he chose. Help others who share his struggle. Don't hide behind your wealth. Use it to create real change." A rush of determination surged within David. Could he, the man who feared the grit of reality, truly be the voice of his son's legacy? It was a calling he never thought he would embrace, yet something ignited in him, a sense of purpose long buried under layers of regret. As they spoke, shifting from memories of Jake to plans, David could feel walls collapsing, revealing a version of himself he had long forsaken. The weight on his heart began to lift, replaced by an urgent desire to rebuild, not just his son's story, but his own. But just as the conversation began illuminating pathways forward, an unsettling noise from the street cut through their focus. A shout. A confrontation. Tension brewed in the air, and David's pulse quickened as he turned to see a looming figure approaching, a man with a fierce look in his eyes. Fear mingled with resolve, and he felt the stakes rising yet again. The moment had come to face more than just memories. David sensed an inevitable confrontation with realities far more complex than he anticipated. He steeled himself for what was about to unfold, realizing he hadn't yet grasped the depths of Jake's world or his own resolve to change it. The tension in the air thickened as the figure closed in, each step reverberating with a sense of impending chaos. David's mind raced, straining against the rapid-fire questions tumbling through his thoughts. Who was this man? What connection did he have to Jake or the world that David was only beginning to uncover? Keith and Marcus shifted slightly, their earlier ease replaced with a readiness to react. They understood this space in a way David couldn't yet grasp. A flicker of defiance ignited in David's chest. Were these two men more adept at navigating conflict than he was? What did it mean for him to suddenly face it without the shield of wealth or status? "Stay behind us," Marcus murmured, eyes fixed on the advancing figure. The urgency made David feel strangely unsettled. It was a reminder that he was a stranger in this reality, unaccustomed to the grit the world demanded. "Who is he?" David asked, his voice laced with unease. Keith's gaze narrowed. "We need to find out. Keep your cool." As the man approached, David discerned a tattered jacket hugging his frame and a wild mane of hair that danced in the wind. His eyes, wild and piercing, seemed to search for something, a fragmentation of rage swirled with desperation. It was evident he held a story poised to break free, yet something unspoken flickered in the depths. "Who are you?" The stranger spat, halting in front of them. The challenge in his tone was unmistakable, a storm wrapped in uncertainty. "I'm David," he stammered, surprising himself with the timidity in his voice. "I'm Jake's father." The man's eyes narrowed further, a flash of recognition, or judgment. "Yeah? And what do you know about him? You let him fall through the cracks." The accusation pierced David, and with it came a surge of memories flooded with guilt. He didn't have a ready answer. His defenses faltered under the weight of the truth. Instead, he felt an odd compulsion, an urge to respond with authenticity rather than the rehearsed explanations reserved for board meetings and gala events. "You're right," David admitted, his voice growing firmer. "I didn't see him for who he was, but I'm here now to understand, and to do better, to help." The man's face softened ever so slightly. A tiny crack in his hardened exterior revealed a flicker of vulnerability. "Help? How can you help when you don't even know his pain?" The words set off a cascade of self-reflection. David had come seeking understanding, but now he confronted the very real implications of that desire. He realized that change wouldn't come from merely wanting to honor Jake's memory. It would demand grit and a willingness to engage with pain deeper than he had ever known. "Help me understand," David urged, taking a small step forward. "Tell me what I need to hear." In that moment, the architect of his son's legacy felt the weight of his own silence crack under the pressure of the truth. A volley of conflicting emotions churned within him. This was no longer just about a father's grief. It was an invitation to confront the complexities of loss, guilt, and responsibility in a world alien to him. As the man hesitated, torn between bitterness and the desperate hope for recognition, David understood that his path forward would demand far more than financial resources or well-meaning gestures. It necessitated real engagement in a world he had previously distanced himself from. "Jake had dreams," the man finally began, a narrative forming in the spaces between his words. "And those dreams got him here, on the streets." David's heart pounded in his chest as the man's voice unfolded a reality steeped in his son's struggles, laying bare the truth he had only brushed against until now. The more he listened, the more he began to realize the depth of his own ignorance. But just as the man was about to give him the very insights David craved, a distant siren echoed through the park, signaling trouble ahead. The world around him shifted once again, and David sensed that the answers he sought were about to slip further from his grasp, just as they had before. With renewed determination, he took a deep breath, ready to face whatever lay ahead. This moment was merely the beginning of a more profound journey. What would it demand of him next? The police sirens drew closer, their wailing cutting through the tension that had thickened around David like a suffocating shroud. In the milliseconds after the sound registered, he sensed a collective shift. The stranger's wild demeanor flickered between anger and uncertainty. David's mind raced, questioning whether the impending chaos would hinder his quest for answers or catapult him into deeper truths. "Listen," David said, lifting his hands defensively. "We don't have to fight. I want to understand where Jake went wrong, what he needed, whatever it takes." The man's hardened gaze softened further, flickers of rage giving way to something that looked like despair, a small crack in his facade. "You think just wanting to help changes anything? You think you can just waltz back into his life now that he's gone?" David flinched. Every accusation held a ring of truth. In that moment, he grappled with how unprepared he truly was to navigate this raw, volatile interaction. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, the abyss of guilt yawning wide below him. "I showed up too late," David replied, voice quaking slightly. "But I can't walk away again, not now." Just then, Marcus whispered urgently, "We need to go, now." The urgency in his tone jolted David out of the vulnerable space he occupied. The man before him needed something, an honest confrontation or perhaps a shared moment of humanity. Instead, he saw the swirling chaos of an unpredictable situation begin to unfold. "Wait," David said again, urgency lacing his words. Please tell me more about Jake, about what he was striving for and what he faced. I deserve to know. It was my failure that left him unprotected. The sirens neared, and with them came the specter of authority, ever encroaching on their raw encounter. Yet there was a shift in the man's demeanor. Beneath the hard exterior, David sensed a glimmer of consideration. Jake wanted to be an artist, the man finally said, his voice quieter now, almost as if sharing a secret. But life pushed him to the streets. Out there, art is just a dream that fades. David absorbed every word, a palpable sense of yearning swelling within him. Here was a thread he could grasp, a glimpse into his son's desires that he had failed to acknowledge. Artistic dreams, unfulfilled and lost. This knowledge felt like ice swirling in his gut but ignited a fire in his spirit. The stranger continued, voice barely above a whisper. He painted on cardboard, wrote poetry, expressed pain the only way he knew how. But you never showed up to care about that. Each word felt like a lash, raw and unrelenting, but David refused to shirk from the truth. This was exactly the confrontation he needed. I want to honor him, David asserted, his voice rising over the approaching sirens. Not with money, but by understanding his world. Show me what he created. I need to see it. I need to feel it. The man's gaze flicked to Marcus and Keith, wariness still flickering behind his eyes. Yet there was a decision brewing, the beginnings of a bond forged in recognition and shared loss. Just as he seemed on the cusp of conceding, the sirens coalesced into chaos. Let's move, Marcus growled, nudging David and forcing him a couple of steps backward. David fought against the tide of urgency but understood the man stood at risk too. Meet me at the corner of 5th and Main, the stranger shouted, urgency breaking through his guardedness. I'll show you what Jake left behind. Hope and dread entwined as the men moved away, caught in the swell of conflict rapidly approaching. David turned, heart racing, uncertain whether this moment was a lifeline or a ruse. But deep down, he confronted a gnawing truth. He might finally be on the brink of discovering Jake's world, yet it came at an undeniable cost. With one last look back, he felt the threads of his old life unraveling. A tension surged, not merely the fear of the police, but the anticipation of what he might unearth next about Jake's choices and his own failings. As the sirens roared closer, David realized that this journey demanded more than mere understanding. It would require every ounce of strength he possessed. Was he prepared to face the entirety of what had been left unsaid? The moment drew nearer, and with it, the inevitable reckoning awaited him. What revelations would this new path reveal about himself? The adrenaline surged through David as he and Marcus sprinted down the narrow alley, the cacophony of police sirens growing ever closer. Each step felt heavier, intertwined with thoughts of Jake, the art he had created, and the life he had wished for. The world outside blurred into a haze of anxiety and determination. He needed to meet the stranger. He needed to unearth the pieces of Jake that he had overlooked. The corner of 5th and Main came into view, laden with shadows and flickering streetlight glow. It felt almost surreal, this notion that he was crossing a threshold to an understanding he had long denied. Marcus also slowed, glancing around and scanning for threats, but David barely registered the danger. His heart was set on one thing: discovery. As they approached the meeting point, time seemed to suspend in that charged moment. David felt a deep need to know, what had Jake poured himself into? Perhaps it wasn't too late for him to cultivate that part of himself that yearned for compassion and connection. He questioned his past choices. Was the financial stability he offered really a substitute for presence, for nurturing his son's dreams? Then he spotted the stranger, positioned half in shadow, his rough clothing contrasting sharply with the warmth emanating from the streetlight. The man's earlier rage had settled into something more understated, yet his eyes remained guarded, weary. David swallowed hard, preparing for an encounter weighted with both hope and dread. Right on time, the stranger greeted, a hint of skepticism still lingering. You've got a lot of nerve, you know. But maybe that's what Jake needed, to feel someone cared enough to search for him. David felt a rush of guilt under the man's scrutiny. I'm here to understand him. Please, just show me what he left behind. The man hesitated for a moment, then beckoned David to follow him as he led the way down a dimly lit side street. "Jake's world isn't a pretty one," he said, glancing back over his shoulder. "But if you want the truth, you better be ready to face it." Each step drew David deeper into an urban tapestry of decaying buildings and street art, a canvas reflecting the lives of those often forgotten. Murals adorned the walls, vibrant yet tragic, telling stories of dreams shattered and voices silenced. It resonated with David, stirring something within him that had lain dormant for far too long. "There," the man pointed to a piece of cardboard propped against a wall, layered with splashes of paint, and the remnants of poetry scrawled in hasty strokes. This was his last piece. It's raw, just like him. He poured it out there because he couldn't find a voice anywhere else. David approached, heart racing. The messages filled with anguish and beauty came alive under the glow of the streetlight. He traced the lines with his eyes, feeling an overwhelming sense of Jake's pain and aspirations thread through every stroke. With every word, he felt a profound mixture of sorrow and revelation. Jake had been an artist battling demons without anyone to truly see him. "I failed him," David admitted, his voice nearly breaking. "I thought I could provide, but I never acknowledged his dreams. I didn't protect him." The stranger remained silent, perhaps waiting for David to grapple with his own realizations. David wrestled with the knowledge that money had never been enough. His presence might have made all the difference. "Maybe it's not too late," the man finally said, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "But it's going to take more than just words. You'll need to stand by that promise. You might find out a lot about Jake, and about yourself." David met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words settle within him. He realized that to honor Jake, he had to confront his own failures, the layers of neglect wrapped in his pursuit of success. It would be a difficult journey marked with pain, but perhaps it could also lead to redemption. As the implications of this new understanding coalesced, David felt a fire ignite in him. He had a chance, not to erase the past, but to reshape it through action, to become the father Jake needed. "Show me more," he urged, gripped by a new sense of purpose. "I need to know everything." But the stranger's expression shifted, a heaviness descending upon him. "You're ready, but there are consequences to this quest. You don't know who you're dealing with." A knot of apprehension twisted in David's stomach. What shadows loomed behind Jake's world? What else lay hidden in the bonds formed from grief and art? The night stretched ahead, rich with possibilities and dangers alike, as David looked down this precarious path. He sensed this was merely the beginning of a deeper dive into the truth he desperately sought. How far was he willing to go, and would he find Jake, or would he confront aspects of himself he had long avoided? As they stepped into the darkness, David braced himself for the revelations that awaited him, knowing he was closer than ever to an answer. The alley swallowed David and the stranger, the ambient noise of the street fading into an unsettling silence that pressed around them. Each footfall echoed like a heartbeat, thrumming painfully against the anxiety laced with anticipation swirling inside him. He tightened his grip on the promise he had made to Jake, desperate to uncover the truth that might lead him to the son he lost. They walked for several moments before the stranger stopped in front of another mural, a stunning work of art splashed across an otherwise desolate wall. This piece was an explosion of color, a phoenix rising from ashes, surrounded by faces that seemed to gaze back at him, eyes full of longing and despair. David felt a jolt of recognition, as if Jake had poured his entire being into this creation. The artist's struggle for dignity, for recognition, splintered the facade he had built around his parenting. "Jake carried a lot of pain," the stranger said, his voice thick with emotion. "He wanted to change the narrative, not just for himself, but for everyone who felt trapped." David let out a shuddering breath, overwhelmed by layers of guilt unfurling before him. He had been so consumed by providing a financial safety net that he had neglected to see the storm brewing within his son. "Why didn't I know?" he breathed, the words laced with anguish. The stranger shrugged, a sign of acceptance rather than indifference. "Sometimes those who love us the most can drown in silence. You were caught in your own struggle, weren't you?" As they exchanged glances, David recognized the reflection of his own buried emotions in the man's eyes, years of sacrifice clouded by the failures he had tried to silence. Despite his wealth, there had been a profound void in his relationship with Jake that money could never fill. "If I had only listened," David muttered, every syllable absorbing the bitterness of acceptance. "And now? Now, you have to do better. It starts with understanding what he left behind." The stranger pointed at the mural, his finger gliding over the vibrant curves. "Contact those who were part of his life. Reach out to anyone who knew him. They can fill in the gaps, show you more of who he was beyond your assumptions as a father." David was silent, digesting those words. They echoed in his mind, igniting a flicker of determination. He needed to confront those uncomfortable aspects. "And what if I find things I can't handle?" The stranger stepped closer, his eyes locking onto David's. "Then you deal with them. This journey isn't about quick fixes or easy answers. It's about confronting your greatest fears, owning your mistakes, and learning to grow from it. Are you prepared for that? To truly face your demons and Jake's?" David hesitated. The weight of the question pressed heavily upon him. Could he accept the uncomfortable truths that lay in wait? Hadn't he already tiptoed around confrontation for too long? Yes, he needed to acknowledge his failings, but it was frightening to think of the darkness that could emerge. He took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "Show me where to start." With a curt nod, the stranger pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "This is a list of people who were close to Jake. Reach out to them. But understand, this isn't a simple task. Some of them may have painful stories to tell, and not all will want to share." David took the paper, his fingertips brushing against the ink that carried the weight of potential future revelations. Each name felt like a thread pulling him deeper into Jake's world, while simultaneously forcing him to confront his own failures. "Thank you," David said, sincerity coursing through his words as he folded the paper and tucked it into his coat pocket. How far would he go? Would he uncover a truth too painful to bear? As they turned to leave, the stranger caught David's gaze once more, intensity dancing in his eyes. "Just remember, this quest isn't solely about Jake, it's about your reclamation too." With a tumult of thoughts surging through him, David stepped into the obscurity of the night, each step marked with newfound urgency. The shadows of guilt and missed opportunities loomed large, but alongside them flickered the faint light of hope. What awaited him on the other side of those phone calls? Would he encounter voices from Jake's past that echoed the pain he had tried to ignore? Or would they reveal a side of his son he had never truly grasped? Time was running out, and with it came the uncertainty of all that lay ahead. Would he be ready to unearth the truth, no matter how terrifying? Motivation surged within him. He would not shy away from the confrontation any longer. The moment of discovery was approaching, and yet, the anticipation of facing what might await gripped at him. These revelations could break him or reinvigorate his purpose as a father. The next steps loomed large, even as the path twisted ahead into the unknown. David stood at the edge of the sidewalk, the paper with names crumpling ominously in his pocket as he glanced down the quiet street. The city pulsed around him, a stark contrast to the storm raging within. Each name hinted at a fragment of Jake's existence that lay beyond David's reach. As he inhaled the crisp night air, a knot of fear and determination twisted in his gut. He took his first step toward the coffee shop where he had arranged to meet the first person on the list. An old friend of Jake's, who had lingered on the fringes of David's knowledge, an ever-present specter in the periphery of his son's life. How had he never thought to learn who these influences were? His grip tightened on the paper. Already the world felt larger, yet terribly isolating. As he walked, David found himself rehearsing questions in his mind. What could this friend possibly reveal about Jake? Would he tell stories of joy or despair, the colors of his son's life painted in shades far removed from the monochrome he had known? Finding the cafe, an unassuming spot with flickering candles and low conversations, David stepped inside, the bell above the door announcing his arrival. The warmth struck him, a stark contrast to the chill of his own doubts. He scanned the room, spotting a familiar face seated in a far corner. Sam, a lanky figure with wild hair and hesitant eyes, was fidgeting with a coffee cup, visibly waiting. As David approached, he felt a jolt of anxiety. This moment was pivotal. It could either shatter his perception further or begin to rebuild what he had thought was lost. "Sam," he asked cautiously, and the young man looked up, recognition dawning slowly. Mr. Jones, Sam stammered, wiping his hands on his jeans, his nervous demeanor palpable. I didn't expect you'd come. Jake talked about you, you know. I know. His voice faded as the realization hit. He had no idea how to navigate the choppy waters of a conversation drenched in grief. I want to hear about him. What was he like? Sam's gaze drifted to the table, lost in memories that painted shadows on his face. He was complicated. But he had this light, he said softly, pulling at an unseen thread. He wanted to be something more, help people. I think he felt like he was meant for bigger things. David felt a stab of pain knowing that he had never recognized this in Jake, never truly comprehended his aspirations. Why didn't he come to me? Why didn't he tell me what he was feeling? The question slipped out, raw and unguarded, revealing the deep fissures of regret in his heart. Sometimes people don't feel safe thinking you won't understand. Sam met his gaze, the weight of understanding heavy between them. He was scared, Mr. Jones. He wanted to be proud, but he also felt trapped. What do you mean by trapped? David pressed, the significance of this insight igniting a desperate need to grasp every word. Sam hesitated and took a breath. He struggled a lot with his identity, you know, the pressure to live up to expectations. It made him push away those who cared. He told me you expected him to follow a certain path. Each word pierced through David like shards of glass. Had he really contributed to Jake's struggle for self? I never wanted that. I just wanted him to be secure. Sometimes security isn't everything. He craved understanding and acceptance, perhaps more than you know. Sam replied gently, tilting his head as if seeing the layers of David's own turmoil buried beneath. The truth clawed at David's heart. He had provided all the material comforts, yet had neglected the very essence of what it meant to be a father. He felt the hollow space where unconditional love should have thrived under his guidance. Is that why he chose to disappear? David's voice quivered, fear creeping in at the corners. Did he think I wouldn't understand? Maybe, but he wanted to forge his own identity, separate from what everyone expected, Sam continued, his voice steady. To find his own path, even if it meant walking on dangerous roads. David was grappling with the implications. Each revelation painted a clearer picture of a son in turmoil, one he had been blind to for far too long. How many lives had Jake touched, and at what cost to his own happiness? As they continued speaking, David could feel the ground shift beneath him. It was uncomfortable, but he understood that he was standing on the precipice of truth. The path lay ahead, darting into uncharted territory. He realized the journey was about more than seeking reconciliation with Jake's past. It was a painful but necessary confrontation with his own shadows as a father. But before the conversation could delve deeper, Sam's phone buzzed violently, pulling his focus. I need to take this, he muttered, standing abruptly. David felt a surge of urgency. Would this conversation lead him to more truths, or would the distraction allow the moment to slip away? What lay behind the next door, the next name on the list? Would he find strength there or amplify his fears? The tension coiled tighter as he braced for the answers that awaited just beyond the threshold of his own understanding. David shifted uneasily in his seat as Sam stepped outside to take the call. The air felt thick, charged with unresolved emotions. He stared into the dimly lit cafe, where laughter and chatter floated around him like a distant symphony. He no longer belonged to that world of casual encounters and mundane worries. A shroud of urgency enveloped him, pushing him deeper into a sea of introspection. The question gnawed at him. How could he have been so detached from the pulse of Jake's life? The edges of his mind edged closer to the realization that the father he had been might not have been the one Jake needed. David quickly reached for his phone, fingers tapping to open a notes app. He had the remnants of Sam's revelations still echoing in his mind. Pressure, fear, isolation. Perhaps confronting each element could guide him on how to reconnect with Jake, not in the form of memories or losses, but as a bridge towards understanding his son's true self. When Sam returned, he looked agitated, an emotion David immediately picked up on. "Sorry about that," said Sam, sleepiness retreating from his eyes. "My friend needed something. Where were we?" David cleared his throat, shifting the conversation. "How could I have done better for Jake? You mentioned he wanted acceptance." The words came out firmly, as if he were asking Sam to lend him the strength of Jake's spirit. Sam took a moment, his gaze drifting. "Maybe it starts with listening. He needed someone to hear his fears without judgment. Have you ever really tried?" The question punctured David's defenses. Had he listened? The rapid cadence of his heartbeat echoed in his ears. He had always believed he offered guidance, that it was enough to provide a steady path. But now, as the shadows of missed opportunities crisscrossed before him, doubt clawed at his resolve. "I was trying to keep him safe, thinking about what was best for him." "Safe isn't a feeling," Sam interjected, affirming the wound already raw in David's heart. "It's how he felt valued and accepted for who he was. You've got to dig deeper. There's so much more than what you see on the surface." Gradually, David began to distill his fragments into a resolve. He needed to transform how he defined protection, interlace it with acceptance. What if I sought out every person on that list? What if I could hear all the voices from Jake's world? Maybe if I embrace their perspectives, I might find a way to connect with him even now. Sam's eyes brightened. Exactly. The more you dive in, the more layered the story becomes. You'll discover Jake's passions, his sorrows, even his friendships. There's a foundation there that you can build on. David felt a spark of determination ignite within him. No longer content with the peripheries of Jake's life, he wanted to immerse himself. He recognized that each conversation might unsettle him. It could rip open old wounds, yet heal others he hadn't realized were there. Taking a deep breath, he asked, "Who's next on the list?" Sam leaned forward, a hint of intrigue crossing his features. "A girl named Mia. She and Jake were close, maybe closer than you think." With that revelation hanging in the air, an undertow of anxiety surged through David. How had he never heard of her? Why didn't he know about this influential figure in Jake's world? Was she an anchor or an enabler? He was filled with a mix of anticipation and dread, knowing this meeting could either shatter the fragile form of understanding he was beginning to build or offer him a window into Jake's soul. "Let's go," David declared, voice steady despite the tremors beneath. The journey ahead was daunting, an unknown territory, but he felt the gravitational pull toward what he hoped was the foundation of healing. The challenge loomed. The next encounter could unravel everything he had thought he knew. But as he stepped from the cafe into the night, David understood. The shadows of his past were merely the backdrop for the light he hoped to bring back into Jake's narrative. And now he could only question. What secrets might Mia hold? Would she reveal the key to understanding the person he had failed to see? As David made his way through the bustling streets, the neon lights illuminated his path, yet darkened his thoughts. Each step felt heavy, burdened by the weight of his responsibility, and the uncertainty of what awaited him with Mia. She was a stranger, yet a crucial piece of the puzzle, the gap between him and Jake's untold story. His mind raced, shadowed by doubts about choices made in the past. What if Mia held insights that would only deepen his regret? Did he truly have the emotional capacity to absorb new revelations, especially ones about a son he had barely known? A mantra of resolve built in the back of his mind. Face it, confront it, and build from it. Sam walked a pace behind, sensing the tension coiling in David. "You ready for this? It's not going to be easy," he warned, his voice steadying with its familiarity. David paused, glancing at Sam. What if she blames me? What if she doesn't want to talk? "Facing the fear is part of the healing," Sam insisted, urging David to move on. "You can't change what was, but you can step into what could be." They finally arrived at a modest apartment building, the paint peeling and the windows dimly lit. A twinge of apprehension twisted within David. He took a deep breath, feeling the tightening in his chest and the echoes of laughter, of joy he'd missed with Jake swirling through his mind. "Ready?" Sam prompted, nudging David forward. With a nod, the two ascended the staircase to the second floor. The hall smelled of burnt coffee and faded dreams, and each step echoed against the thin walls. The door to Mia's apartment appeared worn, much like the story that laid beyond it. As Sam knocked gently, David's heart raced anew, anticipating both dread and hope. A moment stretched long before the door creaked open, revealing Mia. She had an air of quiet strength about her, her eyes sharp and penetrating, the wisdom of her young years etched in her features. "Hi, I'm David," he began, his voice barely masking the tremor behind it. "I was hoping to talk to you about Jake." For a flicker, Mia's gaze faltered. "Jake? You're his father?" The incredulity in her tone shifted the atmosphere, bringing David's intertwined emotions to a boil. "Yeah, I know it's been a while. He's been gone for 4 years." Mia's voice was a whisper, the weight of loss palpable. "I know. I'm trying to understand him better." The words escaped him, raw and unfinished. Mia stepped aside, allowing them to enter her small but inviting space. Framed photographs depicting carefree moments with Jake lined the walls, each snapshot a testament to a world he had been shut out of. David's heart ached as he absorbed glimpses into Jake's joyous past, woven into secrets he never knew existed. "Have a seat," Mia invited, her voice softening as their eyes met. "But let's get one thing straight. I'm not here to sugarcoat anything. If you want to know Jake, you have to embrace the good with the bad." David nodded, ready to confront whatever truths would emerge. "I deserve that. I owe it to him." Mia crossed her arms, studying him carefully. "Why now? After all this time?" "Because I need to understand what I failed to provide," he confessed, his voice trembling with vulnerability he rarely allowed himself. "I need to know who he was, who he is." The conversation unfolded with rawness. Each detail Mia shared pierced through David's carefully constructed defenses. She spoke of Jake's struggles and victories, the isolation he felt despite always being surrounded by people. A fierce desire to belong drove Jake into corners David had never seen, and with every revelation, David's heart cracked open wider. Mia paused mid-sentence. "You know, I almost didn't tell you everything when you walked through that door. I thought about just walking away." The truth hung in the air, and David felt the gravity of it, understanding now that disconnection could echo across time. There was so much more to unearth, yet within that complexity lay the potential for growth. "Thank you for sharing this," he managed, feeling the fragile strands of connection begin to weave together. As their conversation deepened, each topic shared between them felt like a thread woven into a tapestry of understanding. Yet, the reality of facing what they had lost loomed ever present. Had he truly been capable of making the right choices? David silently grappled with the unresolved questions that hung between them. What if it still isn't enough? He pondered, feeling the contours of helplessness tighten around him. Mia's expression softened. Sometimes it's not about enough. Sometimes it's about trying, and that's where you're starting. The weight in David's chest eased, but anxiety coursed through him. The shadows of his past were banished only temporarily. The journey was far from over. Each conversation had propelled him deeper into a world still shrouded in mystery. How could he confront Jake's absence while simultaneously trying to hold on to hope? David braced himself for more revelations. Each answer might lead him further into the unknown, but as he looked at Mia, he sensed that she could possibly illuminate more truths. And amid these moments of uncertainty, he couldn't shake the feeling. What pivotal truths did Mia still have hidden, buried beneath layers of loss he's only just begun to scratch? What might come next could either intertwine their paths deeper than he could imagine or leave him grappling with fresh wounds. With a deep breath, David forged ahead, ready to embrace the complexities in Mia's stories. Each name on the list had brought him closer to understanding Jake's existence. Each encounter peeled back the layers of grief and regret, revealing the raw truths he had long neglected. Mia sat, subtly regarding David as if measuring the weight of his intentions. "One thing you should know," she began. "Jake was not just my friend, he was my anchor during tough times. I think he believed he could save everyone, but in doing so, he often lost himself." Her tone danced between reverence and sadness, striking chords that resonated within David. He felt the words wash over him, merging with his own burdens. I was so focused on my version of success that I failed to notice what he needed from me as a father, David confessed, feeling the jagged edges of regret flare once more. He disappeared into a life I never understood. I thought that security was all he would want. Mia shook her head lightly. Security doesn't mean much when it's not grounded in love and understanding. He turned to deep connections wherever he could find them, even among those you might think were beneath him. He believed everyone deserved his loyalty. Each phrase landed heavily in David's heart. He was confronted not just with an image of Jake as an artist, but as a compassionate soul who had navigated pain with resilience. "Can you tell me about the art he created?" David probed, needing desperately to bridge the chasm that had separated them. What were his dreams? Mia appeared momentarily lost in thought. He painted what he couldn't say out loud. Struggles, hopes, the kind of pain that binds people together, but keeps them apart. The last mural he envisioned was supposed to be a depiction of unity among the neglected. Finding those words inexplicably potent, David felt the constriction inside him ease a little. The way Jake's hopes unified with his grief was a startling reminder of the intricate tapestry of human emotion. "Has he shown you any of his pieces?" David asked, the weight of vulnerability pushing him into uncharted waters. He longed for something, anything, to hold on to. A tangible link to his son who had fought so fiercely for connection. Mia nodded, her expression turning contemplative. "Yes." She stood and moved toward a small closet, returning with a worn sketchbook, the corners ragged and frayed. This was his sanctuary. Here he poured himself into every page. David reached out hesitantly, reverence flooding through every fiber of his being. As he opened the sketchbook, the images flooded his senses, raw creations reflecting pain, beauty, and humanity. Jake had captured moments he had never known, lost souls, laughter overshadowed by sadness, the flickering lights of hope amid darkness. Tears burned at the corners of David's eyes, unyielding in their presence. "I never acknowledged this," he whispered, shaking with the realization of the richness Jake had infused into his art, the depths of feelings he masked from the world. Mia leaned in a little closer. He was a poet at heart, even when he felt most trapped. His biggest fear was being forgotten, and he feared he wouldn't leave anything that mattered behind. In the eye of that confession, David felt a clarity unfurl within him. Perhaps the path to honor Jake was not solely discovering his past, but safeguarding his legacy in the present. "I will carry this forward," David promised, voice steady and unwavering. "I will not allow his story to end with loss. I'll ensure it can create new connections, new conversations. It won't just stop at fleeting recognition." Mia's eyes softened, a myriad of emotions crossing her face. For the first time, David sensed a flicker of acceptance brightening the air. She placed a hand on his arm. "That's a start, but understand that it's not just about dreams. It's about action. You might need to open paths for others, as Jake tried to do. If you truly want to heal, act on that promise. Usher in change." David absorbed her words like a lifeline, firmly tying them to the essence of his growth. This journey was no longer about redemption. It was about legacy. He envisioned creating an exhibition, showcasing Jake's work, perhaps fostering connections to those who existed on the margins, celebrating the convergence of lives rather than isolation. It was validation for Jake's struggle, transforming grief into something meaningful. As the conversation continued to unravel, David began to see how he could shape his path forward, interlacing his newfound understanding with the needs of Jake's world. With Mia's guidance, he mapped out connections to local art organizations, gathering souls who shared Jake's passion and spirit. And with that vision ignited, David could finally feel the fog of desperation clear from his heart. There was empowerment in that clarity, strength in acceptance. He understood he had a choice, to retreat from the pain or transform it into a force for good. Their conversation dwindled as Mia watched him with an expression that melded sincerity and curiosity. "You really mean it, don't you?" she probed, her voice soft but steady. "I do," David replied with resolve. "I didn't recognize Jake for who he was when he was here, but I refuse to let his story dissolve. I will celebrate him and articulate the truth of his spirit." As the night wore on, the darkness intertwined with hope. David left Mia's apartment feeling fortified, empowered by the weight of his commitment. Each step felt lighter. The burdens of regret had begun to lift. He understood that accepting past failures was only the beginning. The transformation lay in the application of that understanding, a force driving him toward accomplishments that honored both Jake and his journey. With every name he spoke into existence, he felt a growing network that would not only recount the past, but also forge new paths into the future. He would not allow shadows to define Jake's legacy. Rather, they would rebuild in vivid colors, honoring the struggle, the love, and the untold stories needing illumination. David emerged into the night, a sense of solid confidence igniting within him. The darkness around him whispered possibilities, and he felt equipped to navigate the challenges ahead. In those moments of understanding, he was not merely a father reconciling with grief. He was a man ready to weave a legacy rich with connection and truth. As he stepped onto the bustling sidewalk, he knew that this journey had only just begun. He was determined to translate his commitment into tangible actions, shaping a future where Jake's spirit could thrive, no longer lost, but finally recognized and celebrated as part of a living legacy. This was not the end. It was the beginning of a profound transformation. A promise fulfilled, a son finally seen. Recognize the profound power of transformation. As you embark on your journey, take action today. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.